So here we are at week 2, and we'll be looking at animism. I warn you, trying to grasp animism is something like trying to grasp oil in your hand or nailing jello to a wall. It's impossible to do. So, as it concerns animism, the very thing that makes it, though, so hard to grasp is what makes it so important to understand. So, we're going to try our best. First, we need a firm definition. We do need to have that. And a great one comes from one of your textbooks, the textbook you're reading this week, Communicating Christ in Animist Context. On page 21, the definition he has for the slippery concept is animism is defined as the belief that personal spiritual beings, and impersonal spiritual forces have power over human affairs, and consequently that human beings must discover what those beings and forces are influencing on them in order to determine future action and, frequently, to manipulate their power. I would read it twice, but you're going to read it this week anyhow. This definition raises another key issue, and that is that animism is not a formal religion like Islam or Buddhism that we'll be looking at later in the quad. It's something much more vague and slippery. Here are some images that might help you as we try to grasp it. No, okay. Think of the nebulous, unnamed spiritual forces that are embodied in the totems that Native American Indian tribes have erected all over the Pacific Northwest. That's animism. Or think of the amulets and charms that people all over the world wear to ward off evil. That's animism. Or think of reading tarot cards or reading palms to determine someone's future. That's animism. There are so many ways that animism manifests, and it's woven into people's life. In fact, many times it's woven into formal religion itself. And that's my third point. Since animism is not a formal religion, it's quite easily mixed in with other beliefs. We will discuss this on week 4 about some of the ways, for example, that's entrenched in parts of the Islamic world. And furthermore, although people don't like to talk about this, animism is often present in Christianity itself, just like any other religion. Sometimes even the exact same thing is in both Christianity and, say, for example, Islam, because animism connects the two. For example, in the Middle East, where Christians have been since the birth of Christ, and where Islam also arose several hundred years after that, you see the animistic symbol called the evil eye. It most often appears on Islamic charms, but Jews and Christians use it at times. For example, look at these crosses with evil eyes on them. Disturbing to me, but there the two symbols are mixed together. Samuel Zwemer was one of the early pioneer missionaries who started reaching out to Muslims. After many years in the Muslim world, he wrote, Islam and animism live in a very neighborly fashion on the same street and in the same mind. Thought that was good. So one of the reasons that animism is so widespread is that it appears both on its own at times, think like the tribal religions, and it appears hiding underneath a veneer of other major world religions. Fourth point I want to make. There is a long history of missionaries dealing with animism so that we have a lot to draw from as we think about how should we approach animistic peoples. A couple of examples from your readings this week. Look on page 29 where the author writes, most of the early converts into the Christian church in Gentile contexts were also themselves animistic. Michael Green asked what attracted ordinary Gentiles to Christianity in the early church, and he came to the conclusion that perhaps the greatest single factor which appealed to the man in the street was deliverance from demons, from fate, and from magic. Okay, and on the next page, he goes on to say, much of Northern Europe was also animistic before Christian evangelists proclaimed the way to deliver the inhabitants from the domain of darkness. Northern Europeans were involved in spirit worship and magic when Boniface first went to Germany. He bravely confronted animistic practices by cutting down the sacred oak of the thunder god, and by doing so demonstrated the power of God over both the taboo of the tree as well as over the spirit that stood behind the tree. Now I want to make a final point about animism. Western missionaries often are very naive about these things. In fact, I would go so far to say not just naive, but Western missionaries are often flat arrogant and foolish on this point. Let me give you an example. Several years ago, I was in the country of Oman, and I was in and out of the country several times over the course of about 3 years. I was there for research and for some training trips I did. And on one of those trips, I went to the ancient city of Nizwa. It's about 3 hours out of the capital city. And there I just happened to see some friends from West Africa. They were, when I met them, leaders of a mission agency in West Africa. They're West Africans themselves, Nigerians. But now they were working as missionaries in Nigeria. And so we went out and had lunch together. And as we were talking over lunch, and I was telling about the kinds of things, the training I was doing with one American team in town, the wife said, please help them understand about the spirit world. She said, this city, Nizwa, is a center of witchcraft and demonic activity going back for 1,000 years. People have been coming to Nizwa to learn how to manipulate the spirit world for 1,000 years. She said there's some really weird demonic stuff that happens here, but the Americans laugh it off and joke as though it's just, oh, silly stories told by old women. Please help them understand how real this stuff is. And that kind of thing is very common. American missionaries tend to either make too much of the spirit world, like a demon behind every doorknob, or they ignore it. Most of them ignore it and write it off as, oh, stories and myths from the culture, just spooky things that really have scientific explanations if we knew how to look into them. Now, if you're unsure what to think about all this, I challenge you to read the Gospel of Luke. You don't have to do this for this, but I'm just going to give you something to do. If you're not sure how you feel about the reality of that spirit world, read the Gospel of Luke. Just sit down and read it quickly, beginning to end. And you tell me if you have the same worldview as is displayed in the Gospel of Luke. And that will help you understand maybe where your position is. Now it's time for me to stop. Enjoy your readings this week. And remember, I really want to connect with you and be available to you. I'm always no more than a short email or a Zoom call away. And you know, my Zoom room is open on Thursday morning. So be in touch. Have a blessed day. Bye.